A skyline that rose too fast to question, lights that never seem to turn off, systems that appear almost engineered to eliminate friction. And for years, that's exactly how Dubai has been seen. Not just as a city, but as proof that if you design something perfectly enough, growth becomes inevitable. But here's the part that's harder to notice. It's not what you see from the outside, it's what people begin to feel once they're inside it. Because lately, something subtle has been shifting, not collapsing, not breaking, just changing. Conversations sound slightly different. Decisions take a little longer. Plans feel less certain than they used to. And none of this shows up in headlines. You won't see it in the skyline. You won't read it in official reports. But it's there, quiet, consistent, and increasingly difficult to ignore. Because when a place that once felt predictable starts to feel conditional, people begin to ask questions they didn't need to ask before. And once those questions start, they don't stop easily. So, what exactly is changing beneath the surface? Why does living here no longer feel as simple as it once did? And more importantly, how early are we in this shift? From a distance, Dubai still looks almost unreal. A city that seemed to compress decades of growth into a single generation, built where there was once only desert, competing with cities that took 100 years to reach the same level of global attention. And it didn't happen by accident. Every road, every port, every tower feels like part of a coordinated plan. Not organic growth, not slow expansion, something more deliberate, faster, sharper, almost too efficient. Tens of millions of visitors arrive every year. The airport ranks among the busiest on the planet. The seaport connects continents like a central node in a much larger system. And when you look at it like that, Dubai doesn't just participate in the global economy. It positions itself at the center of it. That's the promise. That's what people bought into. But speed has a side effect. When everything moves this fast, it becomes harder to see where pressure is building. Because pressure doesn't always slow things down. Sometimes it hides inside acceleration. And the faster the system grows, the less time there is to question whether everything underneath is keeping up. At first, nothing feels wrong. That's what makes it difficult to detect. The malls are still full. The construction cranes are still active. New projects are still being announced. But then you start noticing smaller things. Rent conversations becoming more tense. Lease renewals carrying unexpected increases. People quietly moving further out, trading location for affordability. Over the past few years, housing costs in Dubai have risen sharply. On paper, that signals demand, growth, success. But living inside that growth feels different. Because when prices move faster than incomes, the experience changes. And for many residents, that gap has been widening. Nearly 70% of the population rents. That alone says something important. Because renting isn't just a financial choice here. It reflects how temporary life can feel. When most people don't own, they don't anchor. And when they don't anchor, the city becomes something else. Not a place to settle, but a place to pass through. And that changes behavior. Subtly at first. People delay decisions. They hesitate before committing long-term. They think twice before upgrading, expanding, investing. Because the market itself isn't shaped primarily by residents. It's shaped by capital. Properties are bought to hold, to flip, to rent at a premium. Housing becomes less about living and more about positioning. And when that happens, supply doesn't always match need. Towers rise, communities expand, but they're often built for a specific segment. High-end buyers, international investors, short-term returns. Meanwhile, the people who keep the city functioning day to day find themselves adjusting. Longer commutes, shared spaces, smaller margins, and none of this looks dramatic from the outside. But inside, it changes how the city feels, because growth that doesn't translate into stability eventually creates tension, not visible tension, but lived tension. And then there's the population itself. Dubai has always relied on people from elsewhere. Nearly 90% of its residents are expatriates. That model worked because opportunity outweighed uncertainty. People came, built careers, supported families, and accepted the temporary nature of it all. But now the calculation seems to be shifting. Costs have increased. Housing, education, daily expenses. At the same time, income growth hasn't always kept pace across all sectors. And unlike other countries, residency here is closely tied to employment. Lose a job, and the timeline changes immediately. Not months, weeks, sometimes less. That creates a different kind of pressure, one that doesn't always show up in statistics, but shows up in decisions. Because when stability depends on continuous employment, people plan differently. They stay flexible, ready to move if needed, and increasingly, some are choosing to do exactly that. But departures don't happen all at once. They happen quietly, one family at a time, one professional at a time, and the effects are subtle. A classroom with fewer students, a business with slightly less foot traffic, a neighborhood that feels just a bit less active than it used to. Nothing dramatic, nothing that signals immediate change, but noticeable if you pay attention. And that's how shifts like this unfold. Gradually, without clear signals, until suddenly the pattern becomes visible, not because of one big event, but because of many small ones adding up. Underneath all of this sits a structure that's more complex than it appears. On the surface, Dubai's economy still looks strong. Development continues. Investment flows remain active. Infrastructure keeps expanding. But behind that, the system relies heavily on continuous confidence. Confidence from investors, from global markets, from people choosing to come, stay, and spend. And that confidence is tied to expectations. That growth will continue. That demand will keep up. That conditions will remain favorable. For years, those expectations held. But history shows something consistent. Systems built on confidence don't fail when things look bad. They get tested when things still look good, but begin to feel uncertain. Dubai has seen pressure before. In 2009, financial strain exposed vulnerabilities that weren't visible during the boom. And the system recovered, adjusted, strengthened in some areas, but the core model remained similar: growth driven by investment, expansion supported by ongoing capital flow. And that means one thing: the system performs exceptionally well when confidence is high, but it also becomes sensitive when that confidence begins to shift. Not collapse, just shift. Tourism adds another layer. It's one of Dubai's strongest engines. Millions of visitors, high-end experiences, a global reputation for luxury and scale. But tourism depends on external conditions: travel confidence, global spending power, airline connectivity. And those factors don't always remain stable. When they change, even slightly, the impact is immediate. Hotels feel it, retail feels it, service industries feel it. And unlike larger economies with strong domestic demand, Dubai relies heavily on those external flows, which makes it efficient, but also exposed, especially as competition increases. Other countries in the region are building similar models, investing in tourism, opening markets, offering alternatives, and competition doesn't need to dominate to matter. It just needs to exist. So what does all of this actually mean? That's where it becomes less clear, because on one hand, this could simply be part of a cycle: growth, adjustment, stabilization, and then growth again. Dubai has done it before. It could do it again. But on the other hand, some of these pressures don't feel temporary. Rising costs, structural reliance on external capital, increasing competition. These are deeper factors, and deeper factors don't resolve quickly. They reshape the system over time. And that's where the uncertainty sits, not in what is visible, but in what is changing beneath it. Because when everything still looks functional, even impressive, but starts to feel slightly strained, that's when the real questions begin. Not dramatic questions, quiet ones. Is this still the same opportunity it once was? Or has the environment around it changed just enough to make the old assumptions less reliable? Dubai still represents ambition, speed, possibility. That hasn't disappeared. But for those thinking long-term, building a life, putting down roots, the calculation may no longer feel automatic. It requires a pause, a second look, because the question is no longer just how fast a city can grow. It's how well it can sustain the people inside it while it grows. And maybe that's the shift happening right now. Not visible from the outside, but felt by those inside. A subtle transition from certainty to consideration. And once that transition begins, it changes everything that follows. And maybe that's where this story becomes more personal than it first appears. Because it's not just about Dubai. It's about how we recognize change while everything still looks the same on the surface. So what do you think? Is this just another cycle that will correct itself? Or the early stage of something deeper that hasn't fully revealed itself yet? Take a moment and share your perspective in the comments. I'd really like to know what you see that others might be overlooking. If this made you pause and think, don't let it stop here. Like the video so more people can discover this conversation. and share it with someone who believes Dubai's story is only going one direction. And if you want more content that looks beyond the obvious and uncovers what's really happening beneath the surface, make sure you subscribe and stay connected. Because the biggest shifts rarely announce themselves. They unfold quietly, and by the time everyone notices, they've already changed everything.